The crystal glasses clinked as my father raised his fourth whiskey of the evening. To success, he announced to our gathered family, and to those who understand what it takes to achieve it. His eyes found mine across the dining table, heavy with disapproval. I sipped my water quietly, letting his implied criticism wash over me. In their eyes I was Oliver Bennett, the family disappointment, the black sheep who couldn't hold down a proper job. If they only knew I'd spent the morning in a secure conference room with the Bank of England's governors, finalizing the economic recovery plan that would save our nation from the brink of financial collapse. Still between jobs, Oliver? Uncle Richard called out, not bothering to hide his smirk. What's it been now, 6 months? 8. My sister Margaret corrected, adjusting her Cartier watch, a gift from her investment banker husband. Though I'm not sure we can count those odd consulting jobs he claims to have. I smiled politely, cutting into my beef Wellington. The odd consulting jobs, they mocked, had actually prevented 3 major banks from collapse and restructured our country's entire foreign debt strategy. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. I'm managing, I said simply. My father scoffed. Managing to waste that Oxford education, you mean? Your brother James runs our family's investment firm. Margaret's husband is a partner at Goldman Sachs. And you drift between temporary positions like a lost ship. The irony was almost painful. While they saw a directionless 35-year-old who couldn't commit to a career, the Prime Minister had my private number on speed dial. My economic models had become the foundation for the country's post-crisis recovery strategy. But my security clearance meant maintaining absolute secrecy, even from family. Speaking of success, my mother chimed in. Did you all see the news about the mysterious economic advisor who's been revolutionizing our fiscal policy? They say he's single-handedly prevented a recession. I took another sip of water, remembering the headlines she was referencing. The press had dubbed me the shadow economist, the unnamed architect behind the country's most ambitious financial reforms in decades. Probably some senior civil servant with actual credentials, James said, shooting me a pointed look. Someone who understands commitment and hard work. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A text from Sarah, my direct line to the Prime Minister's office. Emergency meeting. 10 p.m. The situation in Brussels needs your immediate attention. Excuse me, I said, standing from the table. I need to take care of something. Of course you do, my father muttered. Always running away from responsibility. If he only knew I was running toward preventing an international financial crisis. In my car, I quickly changed from my deliberately casual dinner clothes into a tailored suit I kept ready for emergency meetings. Within 20 minutes I was being ushered through the back entrance of 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister and his core team awaited. Oliver, the PM greeted me, his face grave. The EU Central Bank is wavering on our proposed stability measures. We need your magic. For the next 4 hours, I reworked financial models and negotiated with Brussels via secure video link. By 2 a.m., we'd prevented a potential economic catastrophe that would have decimated the European markets. Brilliant work as always, the PM said as we wrapped up. I don't know what this country would do without you. I thought of my family's dinner table, of their dismissive looks and cutting remarks. Just doing my job, sir. The next morning I arrived at my modest flat. The one my family believed I could barely afford, just as my sister Margaret was calling. Mom and Dad are worried sick, she started without preamble. You disappeared from dinner without explanation. Do you ever think about anyone but yourself? I glanced at the morning papers spread across my desk, each featuring headlines about the averted financial crisis. Crisis that no one knew I'd helped prevent. Sorry, I said. Something came up. She sighed dramatically. Something always comes up with you, Oliver. The family's annual charity gala is next week. Try to at least pretend to be responsible for one evening. The charity gala. The event where London's elite gathered to network and show off their success. My family had been hosting it for generations, each year using it as another opportunity to highlight the contrast between their achievements and my apparent failures. What they didn't know was that this year would be different. The Prime Minister had insisted on attending personally, not for them but for me. After years of working in the shadows, he decided it was time for the shadow economist to step into the light. I'll be there, I promised Margaret. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After she hung up, I turned to my secure laptop, reviewing the latest economic projections. The recovery plan I designed was working better than anyone had anticipated. The pound was strengthening, Employment rates were climbing, and foreign investment was flooding back into the country. My phone buzzed again. This time a message from the Bank of England's governor. The numbers are extraordinary. The PM is right. It's time people knew who's really been saving this economy. I walked to my window watching the city wake up. The same city I'd helped pull back from the edge of economic disaster. For years I'd let my family believe I was lost, unfocused, unsuccessful. I'd endured their judgment, their disappointment, their constant comparisons. But in 1 week at their precious charity gala, everything would change. The Prime Minister himself would reveal that the mysterious economic advisor, the financial genius they'd been reading about in the papers, was none other than their disappointing son. My father's words echoed in my head, the black sheep who can't hold a job. I smiled, thinking of the speech the PM had prepared for the gala. Sometimes being the black sheep just means you're playing a different game entirely. The week before the gala crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every family dinner, every condescending phone call, every well-meaning suggestion about entry-level positions felt like another weight added to a spring being compressed, just waiting to release. I was in my real office, a secure floor in Whitehall that officially didn't exist, when James called. "Father insists you wear something presentable to the gala," he said without greeting. "He's arranged for you to borrow one of my old suits. Can't have you showing up in whatever bargain bin outfit you're wearing these days." I glanced down at my bespoke Tom Ford suit, worth more than James's monthly salary. "That's thoughtful of him. And try not to mention your consulting work to any of the guests. These are serious people, Oliver. Board members, CEOs, actual economic advisors." Through my office window, I could see the Bank of England building where, just hours ago, I'd presented my latest financial strategy to its governing board. I'll keep that in mind. Good. Oh, and apparently the Prime Minister might make an appearance. Try to make yourself scarce during that part. Last thing we need is you embarrassing the family in front of the PM. I ended the call, turning back to the multiple screens displaying real-time global market data. Sarah, my liaison with the PM's office, walked in with fresh intelligence reports. "Your family still doesn't suspect anything?" she asked, having witnessed countless similar calls over the years. "They see what they expect to see," I replied, reviewing the documents. "Though that's about to change rather dramatically." She smiled. "The PM's quite excited about the reveal. He's even moved some international calls around to ensure he can make a proper entrance." That afternoon I had another family obligation, tea with my mother and her social circle. I arrived deliberately 10 minutes late to her favorite private club, wearing a slightly rumpled shirt and scuffed shoes, the costume of unsuccessful offspring I'd perfected over years. "Oh, Oliver," my mother sighed as I sat down. "Couldn't you have at least ironed your shirt?" Her friends exchanged knowing looks. These were the wives of industry leaders and political figures, women who measured worth in titles and account balances. "Did you see the morning news?" Mrs. Blackwood asked the group. "They're saying this mysterious economic advisor has introduced some revolutionary new financial model. The markets are responding incredibly well." "My husband says this advisor must be brilliant," Mrs. Henderson added. "Apparently even the Americans are studying his methods now." I stirred my tea quietly, remembering the video conference I'd had with the U.S. Federal Reserve earlier that morning. "Speaking of jobs," my mother cut in pointedly, "Oliver's still looking for something suitable. Perhaps one of your husbands might have an opening? Something entry-level, of course." The women's expressions shifted to practiced sympathy. "Of course, dear," Mrs. Blackwood said. "Everyone goes through difficult periods." Just then my secure phone buzzed. A message from the PM's office. "Brussels emergency. Need you at Downing Street immediately." "Sorry, Mother," I said, standing. "I have to go." "Another one of your mysterious consulting meetings?" she asked, disapproval heavy in her voice. "Really, Oliver, when will you start taking life seriously?" I was already halfway to Downing Street when my brother called again. "You embarrassed Mother in front of her entire social circle," he snapped. "Mrs. Henderson's husband is the finance minister, for God's sake. He could have helped you find a real job." I smiled, thinking of how often I'd overruled that same finance minister in policy meetings. I'm sure he could have. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation, both for the continuing economic management of the country and for the upcoming revelation at the gala. My family's messages grew increasingly demanding as the event approached. "Margaret, don't forget to pick up James's suit. And please do something about your hair. Father, I've arranged for you to sit at the far table. Try not to draw attention to yourself. Mother, several important banking executives will be attending. Please, Oliver, don't mention your temporary jobs. The day before the gala, I was called to an emergency meeting with the PM and his senior advisors. A major international bank was showing signs of instability that could trigger a new financial crisis. We need options, Oliver, the PM said, looking exhausted. If this bank falls, it could start a domino effect across Europe. For the next 18 hours, I worked non-stop, designing an intervention strategy that would stabilize the bank without causing market panic. By dawn, we'd averted another crisis, but I hadn't slept. My phone was filled with missed calls from family members, all leaving increasingly agitated messages about gala preparations. Where are you? James demanded in his latest voicemail. You were supposed to collect the suit hours ago. Do you even care about this family's reputation? I looked at my reflection in the office window, still wearing yesterday's clothes, dark circles under my eyes from the all-night crisis management. In 12 hours, everything would change. In 12 hours they would finally understand where I'd really been all these years. Sarah appeared at my door. Car's ready to take you home. You should get some rest before tonight. I nodded, gathering my things. Any last-minute changes to the PM's schedule? No, he's cleared his entire evening. Says he wouldn't miss this for the world. She paused. Are you ready for this? Once it's done, everything changes. I thought about all the dinners I'd endured, all the cutting remarks, all the times they'd made me feel small for not fitting their definition of success. I've been ready for years, I replied. They just weren't ready for me. The annual Bennett Family Charity Gala was always an exercise in opulence, but this year they'd outdone themselves. The grand ballroom of the Dorchester gleamed with crystal chandeliers and elaborate flower arrangements, each table set with hand-painted china and sterling silver cutlery. I arrived exactly on time, deliberately ignoring James's borrowed suit in favor of a bespoke tuxedo that cost more than his car. The security team, my security team, though no one knew it, nodded imperceptibly as I passed. Oliver. Margaret's voice cut through the crowd. Where on earth have you been? And what are you wearing? That's not James's suit. I managed to find something appropriate, I said mildly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. My father appeared, his face already flushed with whiskey and irritation. You were supposed to sit at table 11 in the back. We have the finance minister and 3 bank chairmen at the main table. The prime minister himself might attend. So I've heard. Just try not to draw attention to yourself, he muttered, already turning away. And for God's sake, don't mention your unemployment to anyone. I checked my phone. A message from Sarah. PM en route. ETA 15 minutes. Ready when you are. The ballroom filled quickly with London's elite, banking executives, political figures, industrial titans. I watched as my family worked the room, my father bragging about James's latest business acquisition, my mother showcasing Margaret's charity work. Did you hear? Mrs. Henderson whispered loudly to her group, not bothering to lower her voice as I passed. They say the shadow economist will be revealed tonight. Apparently he's been working directly with the PM all this time. Brilliant man by all accounts, her husband, the finance minister, added. Completely revolutionized our economic approach. Saved us from certain recession. I hid my smile behind my champagne glass, remembering how vigorously he'd opposed my strategies until the PM had forced him to accept them. At precisely 8:30, a ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. The Prime Minister had arrived. I watched my father practically trip over himself rushing to greet him, James and Margaret close behind. My mother beamed with pride as the PM shook their hands, clearly believing this moment was about their family's importance. Ladies and gentlemen, the PM's aide announced, the Prime Minister would like to say a few words. The room hushed. My family preened, positioned prominently near the stage. Thank you all for having me tonight, the PM began. As many of you know, our nation has faced unprecedented economic challenges in recent years. We've weathered potential recessions, international banking crises, and market instabilities that could have devastated our economy. My father nodded sagely as though he'd had anything to do with it. But thanks to one person, one brilliant economic mind, we've not only survived these challenges, we've emerged stronger. You've all heard of him in the press. The shadow economist, they call him. The mystery advisor who rebuilt our financial strategy from the ground up. The room was completely silent now, every eye fixed on the Prime Minister. Tonight I'm finally able to reveal his identity. To thank him properly for his service to our nation. The PM's eyes found mine across the room. Oliver, would you join me up here? The silence turned electric. My father's cigar dropped from his fingers. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. James looked like he'd been struck. I walked to the stage, each step echoing in the stunned quiet. As I reached the PM, he pulled me into a warm embrace. Thank you, he whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch, for saving our country's economy. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. My mother had to sit down, her legs seemingly unable to support her. For the past 5 years, the PM continued, Oliver Bennett has been our chief economic advisor, working at the highest levels of government. His financial models have been adopted by countries across Europe. His crisis management strategies are being taught at Harvard and Oxford. While working in complete secrecy for national security reasons, he has literally reshaped the future of our nation's economy. I stepped to the microphone, my voice calm and clear. Thank you, Prime Minister. Though I must admit, maintaining that secrecy was made easier by certain preconceptions about my career path. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. James was frantically Googling on his phone, presumably finding all the news articles about the shadow economist that he'd previously ignored. Oliver, the finance minister called out, his previous condescension replaced with desperate recognition. All those meetings you missed, those unexplained absences, were spent in Whitehall, I finished for him, usually overruling your more conservative policies. The room tittered nervously. My mother had started fanning herself with a napkin. In fact, I continued, that emergency last night? The one that kept me from picking up the borrowed suit? That was me preventing a major international bank, one that some of you represent, from collapsing this morning. You're welcome, by the way. The PM smiled broadly. Thanks to Oliver's work, we're now entering our strongest economic period in decades. The banking reforms he designed have become a model for financial systems worldwide. The consulting jobs, Margaret whispered, loud enough to carry. The mysterious meetings were usually with heads of state, yes, I nodded. Though I did enjoy hearing everyone's helpful suggestions about entry-level positions. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of revelations. Every major financial figure in the room had been affected by my policies, had read my papers, published under a pseudonym, had implemented my strategies. Now they were all clamoring to speak with me, to claim some prior connection, to establish a relationship with the man they just discovered had been quietly shaping their entire industry. My family remained in various states of shock. My father attempted to approach several times, each time seemingly losing his nerve. James kept opening his mouth to speak, then closing it again. Margaret appeared to be having some sort of existential crisis in the corner. Finally, my mother made her way to me, tears in her eyes. Oliver, we had no idea. That was rather the point, Mother. But why? Why let us believe? I turned to face her fully. Because you all needed to believe you knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. It made my work possible. And if I'm being honest, it made tonight infinitely more satisfying. As the evening wound down, the PM pulled me aside one last time. You could have told them years ago. I would have authorized it. I watched my family huddled together, still trying to process the evening's revelations. Some lessons are better learned dramatically, I replied. Besides, they never asked. They were so convinced they knew who I was, they never bothered to actually find out. Later that night, as I prepared to leave, my father finally found his voice. Son, we've been so wrong about you. I straightened my perfectly tailored tuxedo. No, Father, you've been exactly right about one thing. I couldn't hold a job. I smiled. I was too busy running the country's economy. The next morning's papers were splashed with headlines about the revelation. My phone was flooded with messages from family members, ranging from apologetic to sycophantic. But I was already back at work, focused on the actual business of managing a nation's financial future. Because that's the thing about being the black sheep. Sometimes you're not lost at all. Sometimes you're just operating on a completely different level, one that the rest of the flock can't even see until it's suddenly dramatically revealed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the black sheep turns out to be the one leading them all along.